I've got both the ACDP and the DA joining us. There's lots of commentaries coming through. And I'm going to start with the DA's Devan George. He's the Shadow Minister for the party. Devan, we spoke earlier this morning about the debt of Eskom and government taking that on. They have now announced that they will be taking a portion of that on with them. What are your thoughts as the DA?
Well, it's not a surprise. Overall, the Minister fell very short of our expectations, specifically on things like driving growth, generating jobs in our economy. He believes that the government can do that with bailing out state-owned enterprises. We know that's not going to work. We were looking for some kind of incentive for business to be able to operate more effectively. Also, Treasury itself has said that they would reduce debt over the next 2 years, and they're doing the opposite. So we're going to see another 126 billion rand between that and 260 billion coming onto the national balance sheet. It's going to increase interest that we have to pay, and it's going to crowd out service delivery far more than we have already. So I can't see how that's going to be viable. It's also going to create moral hazard for Eskom, because there's going to be no incentive whatsoever to be efficient, because they believe that government will just bail us out. So it was the wrong move from the Minister. We will be questioning him obviously in Parliament about it. He's talking about very stringent conditions. We've heard this all before. What are those stringent conditions actually going to be? So that's the next step. We will ask what are they and how you're going to actually police those. So we'll be watching that. But overall, it was a budget from a broken government that really is demonstrating that it's unable to resolve our economic crisis. And the most egregious thing of all from the Minister, he never mentioned a single word about the cost of living crisis affecting South Africans. That is the tragedy of this budget.
Yeah. Just before I let you go, just a quick commentary. The tone that he used when he spoke about corporate South Africa indicated that trajectory of corporate taxes continuing to decline to encourage investment is something that they're going to continue on. What are your thoughts on that tone that he expressed during the statement?
Well, I think it's more talk. We want to see the action. I think the most fundamental thing is that if you position a dysfunctional state at the center of our economy, that won't work. What you need to do is you need to actually give proper incentives to business. Make sure you can give proper tax incentives, especially to smaller business. Those are the entities that are going to generate jobs in our economy, not large state-owned enterprises that are basically dysfunctional and into which a whole lot of extra money is thrown. So we will be questioning him on that also, but we do not believe that this is the recipe for a successful South Africa economically.
Devan George, as always, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I'll let you head off to all the others that you have to do. Thank you very much for being patient with us, Mr. Swart. Your thoughts, your initial thoughts on what came out of the statement today. Some encouraging news about the special relief of distress grant that came there, but also some concerns that have been expressed afterwards.
Yes, there are deep concerns, but let's start with the positive. I think the positive is the tax overrun, which was 83 billion rand, which was collected. That's additional funds. And so largely that amount, 65% of that, must be used to reduce the debt and stick to the fiscal consolidation path. But as my colleague said, what is concerning is the debt that is now being taken over by government, Eskom's debt. That's a huge amount, and that will then place more stress on our government debt levels. But the relief of distress grant, 350 rand a month, is a token. It's something. But our consumers, our households are really struggling. Electricity prices shooting up, fuel prices shooting up, interest rates shooting up. And so we would have liked to have seen more relief. And maybe in February there will be some more relief announced. But again, when one looks at all the projections, it is dependent on certain things that he has penciled in, such as the 3% public sector wage increase. Now that we know the unions are not accepting that already. So those projections could be out of line, and we could be in for a surprise in February. But I think as a whole, there are massive challenges facing government at this stage. When you come to the state-owned companies, when you see the escalating debt levels and debt service costs of 355 billion per year, which don't seem to be correctly and properly addressed. We've got to get economic economic growth must be stimulated. That's where the private sector plays a key role, with government playing an enabling environment. What we do welcome with my history in the Justice Committee is additional funds for the NPA, the Hawks, the SIU, because not only must perpetrators be locked away and so that people can feel safe in their homes, but those stolen billions must be collected and can be collected. And just think, if those billions of rands are collected, it can help balance the books. So we'll be studying the detail, we'll be engaging with the Minister on the medium-term budget, and then obviously the detail will come out in February's budget.
Thank you very much. I am told that Devan Murugan has got the Commissioner of SARS standing by. I've just been speaking there to ACDP's Steve Swart, but I'll take you to Devan now, who's got Edward Kieswetter, the Commissioner, with him now.
Yes, indeed, Rofhiwa, SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter with me. Commissioner, it's so significant talking to you because 90% of what comes into government's coffers is because of your department. We were chatting earlier off camera that, we're speaking about this, 80-odd billion rand that came in as a windfall. And I suggested to you what happens if the commodities end. You then tell me that's not where the story is. What do you mean by that?
So we've actually seen a year-on-year decline in contribution from the mining and mineral sector. We have seen the impact this year in the financial services sector. We have seen a huge year-on-year increase, and secondly, also a year-on-year increase in the manufacturing. And you see that follow through when you look at a growth in imports and exports. Okay? So we believe that whilst in the previous year there was a bigger dependence on commodity pricing cycles, we've actually seen some of that slowing down, and the reliance moves elsewhere in the economy. But where we draw our confidence from, and we do so cautiously, is that we are slowly seeing SARS laying the foundation on what a good, healthy, capable revenue authority ought to be doing, which is to improve the levels of compliance, to be able to apply a combination of our audit and investigative skills, supported by data analytics, artificial intelligence, and a technology-enabling environment to identify and respond to the significant areas of non-compliance. So I can tell you now, for example, we employ hundreds of people in terms of just following up debt and outstanding returns. We have tens of numbers of people doing criminal investigations, other people doing lifestyle audits. Criminal investigation is an important area for us because just this year we were able to hand over 100 files to the NPA. We've also been able to secure 57 convictions, a 98% conviction rate. So the quality of the work we do then translates into a successful prosecution. So there is no easy money.
But that costs money, doesn't it? I mean, you need the teams. You need to be well-resourced. If you want to have the same success you had with the tobacco, for example, you're going to need resources. How's it coming along?
So I'm in constant arm wrestling with my Treasury colleagues because they have the responsibility of allocating money across government. I remind them all the time that SARS is not a cost center, it's an investment center. We have the capability to convert every R1 invested to us with a return of between 10 to 100. And our record shows that, so it's not a number we grab out of thin air. And so I will continue to beat the drum to say that your best investment is an investment in SARS. The Minister today announced, and we are fully supportive of his resolute intent to improve our fiscal framework through fiscal prudence. None of that would be possible if we did not have the positive revenue outflow collections. And so I will continue to beat the drum and say, allow us to employ more people, to invest in our modernization. It will yield the lowest return to government to strengthen our fiscal integrity and fulfill the long-term aspiration that the Minister sets out to reduce our reliance on debt, to therefore reduce our debt service cost, and to free up more money to attend to the important social and infrastructure programs of government.
Okay, so it's return of investment, in other words, in your quarters as well. Commissioner, are there fewer businesses, especially small businesses, contributing to tax coffers? I want to ask you that question because we want to get a sense of what economic activity is like. COVID was here. We have a very hard time with the recessionary environment globally here as well with inflation high. Our business is closing down.
Yeah, we actually saw in the first half of this year, we saw about 1,200 small businesses applying for business rescue. And so they are struggling. It would be disingenuous of us if we were to be dismissive of the real struggles of ordinary South African taxpayers for whom food prices and fuel prices is a huge component of their disposable income, and they are struggling to just make ends meet. If you're a small business, you don't have the deep pockets, you don't have access to an overdraft in the bank, and so we see that reflected in the number of small businesses applying for business rescue compared to larger businesses that can leverage their balance sheets. And so that does have a negative impact on our tax base. Thankfully, our persistent efforts to also identify taxpayers who are not registered has yielded a significant growth, again, over 800,000 of additional taxpayers across the taxes. Not all of that are contributing, but we have seen an improve, just for this year so far, an additional 2.5 billion rand that have been added to the coffers just by identifying and registering taxpayers that hitherto were not registered. So it's inflows and outflows, but on the whole, we see a positive trend in terms of our compliance efforts.
And just lastly and finally, I mean, you get those that say, well done on your recovery. I mean, what was it? You announced about 8 billion rand in your recovery of illicit operations. Some may pick up their hand and say, wait, hang on a second, are you following the crooked politicians and the politicians that may have companies that are not aligned with SARS regulations? Are you doing enough in that regard? It can be a bit of a mosquito in your ear. What do you say to people who bring that up?
So I want to give South Africans the assurance that we do not have a hit list. We apply evidence using data science, using our analytic ability, and simply comparing that with the legal obligation of every taxpayer from the president through to the gogo in the township. And therefore there is no one in South Africa who will be able to expect a preferred or preferential treatment as far as we are concerned. I am on public record to say the day I begin to fiddle with that, I should rather resign and get someone else to do this job. Our message to all of our staff every day is to say we administer the law. We are not politicians. We are administrators, and we run an operation that seeks to achieve the maximum level of compliance in terms of our legal mandate. And so, to the second part of your question, are we doing enough? Nowhere near enough, because that's a resource issue. If we had more teams, I shared with you an example that we using the breakthrough we've had in the tobacco industry. It took a team of 9 people working through 60 terabytes of data, 3 years to collect and to connect the dots that allowed us to break through that syndicate. Imagine if we had 10 teams of 9 people. We could be working on 10 of these syndicates, because we know there's equally non-compliance and criminal activities in the clothing and textiles industry, in the leather and footwear industry, in the gold refining industry, in the alcohol. So we can list you the areas where we see non-compliance with the law. But we are limited. We only have so many debt collectors, and therefore we can only make so many calls, issue so many civil judgments. So every time we add another 10 or 100 skilled people within SARS, we expand our capability to deal with more cases, resolve them earlier, and thus ensure an improvement in compliance and therefore an improvement in our revenue collection.